Good morning, Shavua Tov. I know that class has been a little spotty lately. I've been traveling and other interesting events. Some that I could share, perhaps. Some that is maybe difficult to share or not appropriate to share due to some of its confidentiality. But we're here. We're here today. And so let's learn a little Torah. Maybe with first, we are today in the second day of the month of Av. Av is the 10th, the Chodesh HaAsiri, the 10th of the month of the Hebrew calendar. And as such, it right away reminds us of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is next Sunday, and which is why there probably won't be class. I might record a class before and publish it on Tisha B'Av, but I doubt it. You're actually not supposed to learn some Torah, giving some tzedakah. We start with tzedakah. As to elicit, sorry for the extra ringing over here. There is a ladies' class brunch going on, and so there might be a couple of disruptions here with the bell ringing for the next couple of moments. So my apologies for that. But Tisha B'Av being the saddest day in the Hebrew calendar, I'm going to turn this off. That's what I'm going to do, so it doesn't bother us. Seems to be somewhat malfunctioning. That's the story. So my apologies. Someone is going to have to open this door up. I'm not going to leave the class over here. Okay, so Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is next Sunday. It's a sad time in the Jewish calendar. It's the saddest day of the year. And as a result, you're also not supposed to learn Torah. And yesterday on Shabbat was the first day of the month of Av. And we read something interesting in the Torah, which is something that only happens once in quite a number of years. You might know this, you might not know this, but the only person, the only tzaddik, the only righteous person, or I believe any individual at all, that the Torah mentions the day of their passing, what we call the Yartzeit, was yesterday in Parshat Mas'eh, the last portion of Bamidbar, of Numbers, and the Torah mentions the passing of Aharon, the high priest, brother of Moses. Although his passing was already mentioned earlier, it again mentions again his passing and the date of his passing, and it tells us that it was on the first day of the month of Av, Rosh Chodesh Av, which was yesterday. So, number one, he's the only tzaddik, not Moses, and not Adam, and not Noah, and not Abraham. Nobody is their day. It just says that they passed away. What day they passed away? Often we don't know. Sometimes we know because it might be mentioned in the Talmud or in the Medrash, but Aaron is explicitly mentioned in the Torah, his day of passing. And not only that, when we read the Torah of the date of his passing is the actual date of his passing. Rosh Chodesh Av was yesterday, and that is the day he passed away. This is something that only occurs once, I think, in 7 years or something like that, where we read the day of Aaron's passing on the Shabbat, which tells us that today Aaron passed away. And I was listening to a shiur by Rabbi Ashkenazi from Israel, and some other thoughts as well. And I want to, and he, the question is asked, why? Why is Aaron the only one that's mentioned? And why is it Rosh Chodesh Av? Why did he pass away on Rosh Chodesh Av? The reason simply why the Torah doesn't tell us the day of a tzaddik's passing, because that's not important. To the extent it's important, but not to the extent that it should be mentioned inside the Torah. It is mentioned maybe in commentaries and so on, but Aaron somehow, not only is his passing mentioned, but the day of his passing, telling us that the date of his passing is also a message and important to us. And what is it? What is it that connects the day of his passing to Aaron? So, the one of the commentaries says something that because we know that Aharon, the high priest, excelled in love of fellow man, love of his fellow Jew. Therefore, Aaron is given sort of special recognition. And we find that on the day of his passing, even more than Moses, it says that Aaron's mourning was felt and expressed by all of Israel because of his making that extra effort to bring peace amongst amongst people. And it is because of that that he gets that special recognition for us to honor and know his day of passing. Now, this goes a step further. This goes a step further because there's also sort of a content connection. Rosh Chodesh Av is when we begin the more formal preparation for Tisha B'Av, which marks the destruction of both temples in Jerusalem. In a broader sense, that we mourn on that day, in general, the exile, the diaspora, the suffering, the persecution of our people until today, where we find ourselves in a very challenging time. And, I mentioned about Hashgacha Pratit last week. Last week I was in Washington. I went there to put up mezuzahs for somebody who was very dear to me. And I went up there to put up mezuzahs at their home and at their office. And in such, I met the head of the anti-Semitism task force in the Justice Department, just by divine providence. It wasn't a scheduled meeting. And this fellow, who is I'm just not mentioning names at this point, at least here on social media, I choose not to mention names. This fellow, who is not of the Jewish faith, but has been appointed as the head of the anti-Semitism task force at the Justice Department, and we sat down, not planned, but we just sat down and we had a discussion for maybe a half hour, and I was so appreciative of this person's support and care and concern and action regarding the rise of anti-Semitism that we are seeing, that I was comforted by this person's commitment, and I was also comforted by seeing the hand of Hashem in all of this, seeing the hand of God that just came about unplanned, and good things will continue to hopefully happen as a result of that. That it's just another message from above, as we are worried and concerned about the rise of hate and violence and accusations against good people, and not recognizing those who are responsible for so much hate and murder and so on. But there's a comforting aspect to it, in the sense of saying it is so obvious that Hashem, God, has a plan over here, and that it will, with Hashem's help, turn out for the good, and good will prevail. There's that deep inner belief and faith that is the case. And that is somewhat related to the theme that we want to discuss today, and also with regards to Aharon, the high priest. Because Aaron, the high priest, as I just mentioned, as the Mishnah, Ethics of Our Father, says, was an Ohev Shalom v'Rodev Shalom. He loved peace and he pursued peace. The Talmud even says that he sometimes would finagle a little bit with the truth just to bring about peace between husband and wife, two human beings. He pursued peace. There are people who love to stir the pot and like to create, problems, like to set people apart, and so on. Aaron was just the other way around. Whatever he could do to bring people together, that's what he did. Now, why is this connected to Chodesh Av, to the month of Av? Because in the month of Av, as I mentioned, is when we begin for 9 days until Tisha B'Av, a higher level of, or a stronger, a more intense level of mourning as we prepare for Tisha B'Av. The Talmud tells us that the cause, amongst other reasons, but if not the main reason, that what brought about the destruction, especially of the second temple, was the lack of unity and the discord and the hate between our people. And therefore, in order to reverse the destruction and all that comes with it, or as the consequences or a result of, we need to increase in unity. And unity, to unify and to love even somebody who you disagree with passionately, is not an easy thing. And that's why Aaron is the role model. It is exactly for that reason that Aaron is honored in the beginning as we enter on Rosh Chodesh Av. Aharon HaKohen, Aaron the high priest, is honored during this period of time because he is the anecdote of reversing. The prophet Isaiah says, Yehavchu yamim eilu l'sason v'lesimcha. These days should be transformed for joy, for happiness, from mourning to joy. Me'evel l'simcha, from mourning to joy. So therefore, how do you do so? By being a student, as the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, Havei mitalmidav, by being a student of Aharon, student of incorporating, of being inspired, of implementing within your own life, in going in Aaron's ways, even when sometimes you have reason for animosity or so on, or to create issues, negative talk, gossip, and so on. It's sometimes very tempting, and we're all guilty of that sometimes. You have to learn and be a student, a disciplined student of Aaron, until you, in your heart, you develop a love, even for somebody who you disagree with. Now, I think it's the Sfas Emes, the Gerer Rebbe, I think, that says the reason why Aaron passed away on Rosh Chodesh Av specifically is because God wanted that we should honor Aharon, and the best time to honor Aaron and learn from him and implement his life is when we are already in a state of mourning. So since Chodesh Av, we're already in a state of mourning, so God said, let him pass away on the first day of Av. This way, everybody will focus fully on what Aaron's life was and what we need to learn from him. Would Aaron pass away, during Purim, for example, everybody's, as we would call, not in that mood, not in that mindset, or in that mindset of joy, of celebration, and so on. It's Purim. We're happy. During the month of Av, which in any way is connected to Aharon because it's connected to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple. And Aaron was the high priest who was the holiest serving Kohen in the Bet HaMikdash. Therefore, it's an appropriate time that at that moment, we honor Aharon at that time when the Bet HaMikdash is our focus. And we're mourning over the Bet HaMikdash. And the purpose of the mourning is that it transforms into something positive, that we learn and we grow and we improve so that the Bet HaMikdash could be rebuilt. And all the tsaris and all the troubles and suffering can be reversed. How appropriate is it that Aaron's day of passing should be mentioned, should happen on Rosh Chodesh, and we should read about it on Torah, especially this year on the first day of the month of Av. And in that note, I want to sort of conclude with a story, which is a very beautiful story of sort of a way of honoring somebody in what they excelled. I have it printed out over here. Hold on just a moment. He says like this. So he brings a story, and I know who this story is with. There's a lady, there was a woman in Crown Heights, the little shtetl that I grew up with in Brooklyn, New York. For all my fellow Brooklynites or New Yorkers who are listening, maybe give us a thumbs up for your days in Brooklyn or New York, Queens, Bronx, whatever it might be. And there was a lady. She was like a matriarch of the family. Her name was Tybal Lipsker. Tybal Lipsker. This lady, Tybal Lipsker, went through the Soviet era of World War II, where there was a lot of hunger, and she was blessed with many children, and there was much difficulty and suffering and so on as you went through that period of time. And then she finally came to the United States of America, and she had her struggles over here. It wasn't easy, and I believe she lost members of her family. And at one point, she went into the Rebbe. This was, I think, in the 1950s or 1960s. I'm not sure when she exactly came to the United States. And she went into the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and then she told the Rebbe that she's depressed. All this real trauma that she went through in her childhood was something that was weighing heavily on her, and she's depressed. So the Rebbe gave her a very interesting suggestion or directive. The Rebbe said to her, "This is what I say. This is my recommendation. There are weddings in Crown Heights. How about you take on the mitzvah? It's a mitzvah that's mentioned in the Talmud. It's a mitzvah to bring joy to the bride and groom, Chatan and Kala. I suggest weddings in Crown Heights all the time. The community was maybe smaller then, but nevertheless, there was weddings. And how about you take upon yourself this beautiful mitzvah or custom to bring joy to the bride. Every night when there's a wedding, go to the hall, whether you're invited or not, and just dance before the kala, bring some joy." And this is what she did. She went ahead, she made it, since the Rebbe recommended it, and she, of course, was a follower of the Rebbe, and she held his recommendation in the greatest and highest of esteem, and so on. So she followed the Rebbe's instruction, and every time there was a wedding in Crown Heights, even as the community grew, she would show up. She, as I said before, whether she knew the kala, did not know the kala, and she would do her dancing, and it became a thing. I remember there was another fellow like that on the men's side. His name was Rabbi Chatzkel Brod. Even in his older years, he would dance like a young man, and he would just add joy to the wedding on the men's side. As you know, in a Jewish wedding, the men dance on one side and the women dance on another side, and there's a mechitza in between. So this Mrs. or Rebbetzin Taiba Lipsker, would go and bring joy and simcha to the bride. This went on for many years, even into her older years. When her youngest son, she had many boys. She has many boys. The Lipsker family is a huge, prominent family in the Chabad world. So her youngest son, Shmuel, was marrying off a child, a grandchild of hers, and she was already 94 years old. And everybody was there getting ready for the wedding. Everybody was dressed in their wedding gowns and so on. And shortly before the chuppah, Mrs. Taiba Lipsker, as I mentioned, as aged 94, really started to feel she wasn't feeling well, and they took her to the hospital. So shortly after the chuppah, or maybe even before the chuppah, many of her children and grandchildren rushed to the hospital as it was very serious. And here, she went to the hospital. This was her last moments on earth, and right there at the hospital, everybody that came to visit was in their chasuna, in their chatuna, in their wedding garb, in gowns and in makeup and all that, and suits. And they all felt and sensed that this was the greatest merit in honoring her, that here was, who usually shows up in the hospital dressed in wedding gowns? Doesn't happen. But this Hashem made it so, to honor this remarkable woman and her commitment and dedication for years and years to bring joy to any and every bride. And how did she spend the last moments of life in a way of showing her what it was the greatest honor that they could give her, is that they're all there, not because they planned it, because you don't plan these things, but they're all there in their wedding garb. So here with Aaron as well, God says here was a lover of his fellow man. And he didn't just love, he did whatever he can, which is why when he passed away, it says, Kol Beit Yisrael, the entire Jewish nation, mourned over his passing. God says the best time for me to honor this person is during a time where he could again be effective and inspire people, bringing together to reverse the consequences, the suffering that comes about primarily because of the lack of unity amongst ourselves. So what better way to take the life of Aaron, what we read yesterday, the passing of Aaron on the day of Av, and we are now in the days of mourning. By Jewish law, there's increased mourning. We don't listen to music, especially not the live music. We don't buy new clothing. We spend more time thinking about the exile. We spend time in introspection of what brought about the exile, all as we lead up to the fast of Tisha B'Av, which, like Yom Kippur, is the only other fast that we fast for a full 24, 25 hours. So may the learning about these things and the resolution and inspiration that we take from this bring about the prophet's promise that Yahavchu Yamim Elu L'Sason V'L'Simcha, that these days will be transformed into days of joy, the days of holidays, with the reversal of the destruction of the temple, with the reversal of suffering, with the reversal of those who have again raised the ugly head of anti-Semitism, which results in more violence against our people. May all that be reversed and transformed for the better, for the good, where everybody will see the glory of Hashem, as the prophet says, that it is right and just to follow in the paths of Hashem, not to be influenced by so much of the negativity and hate that's out there speedily nowadays. Thank you so much for listening, and have an easy fast with Tisha B'Av. But if the righteous Mashiach arrives before then, God willing, as we say every day on Imam, and I believe with complete faith, then there will be no need to fast, and will be opened and revealed blessings. Have a fantastic week.